Yes, we are back. Welcome back to the Tech Zone. I am Paul Amadeus Lane, and like we talked about in the early part of the show, came across this great article about how Google and Amazon are slowly killing the gadget as we know it. So I reached out to the reporter to talk to him about it. I am so honored to have with me right now in the tech world. You know who I'm talking about. The great Matt Berger. He joins me, Business Insider Tech Reporter. What's going on? Matt, how are you, guy?
Hey, thanks. Doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Matt, it is truly an honor. I follow your articles, follow your work. And when I came across this article, I was like, I have to get Matt on. I have to get Matt on because this is something I think that we really need to, to really, keep our pulse on. And what made you write this article, Matt?
Well, I was just thinking about as time goes on, there's been this shift away. A computer has been one thing for so long, and now a computer means something totally different. Time it was a monitor, it was a mouse, it was a keyboard. I'm talking about like from your elementary school's computer lab.
Absolutely.
And then the basic idea hasn't changed much in 20 years, right? Then all of a sudden you have the Echo, you have your smartphone, you have the Chromecast, you have all these little things that plug into the internet that don't work without the internet and that are completely changing how we think about computing and gadgets and all that other good stuff.
Yeah, you're spot on, Matt. I remember I did some computer operation training many moons ago, and I remember the IBM PS2. Yeah, and the L16 processor or something. I remember that, and I'm like, where we're at today when it comes to computing, Matt, it's like we're like the Jetsons now. It's just so much.
Well, more than that, it's like, yeah, it's just like from the days of the IBM PS2 PC and all that, things hadn't changed for a good long while there. Like fundamentally, the computers got faster, but the ways we use them didn't really change. And now you're right, it's totally like the Jetsons, because now it's like we went from won't it be nice when we have robots, and now we have robots that are like, oh, they're actually kind of annoying.
Yeah,
right?
And it's like, kind of scary too, aren't
they? Better robots. It's like, wow, when did that happen?
Yeah,
right?
and they're also kind of scary too, aren't they?
We need to make things smarter, but the change is happening.
Yeah,
that's right.
Absolutely. So, when we look at the article right here now, how specifically is Google and Amazon really killing the gadgets as we know it?
Well, like, the way to think about it is when you bought a PC even 10 years ago, right? Even 5 years ago, that thing was getting obsolete while it's sitting under your desk. The latest and greatest is still coming out. You know what I mean? And it's like how they say that a car starts losing value when you drive it off the lot.
Yes.
The same thing happened to your PCs, to your tablets, to your anything, right? It's that your investment in those things was getting worse. You were losing value the longer you had it. You can even say the same thing about your PlayStation, right? But with stuff like the Chromecast and the Echo and stuff like that, it's a cheap gadget. It's designed to be cheap. It's designed to be as cheap as they could possibly make it. They'd probably give it out for free if they could. But that's all this stuff is coming into it. It's connecting to these amazing internet services, your Spotify, your Netflix, your YouTube, your whatever else, your Twitch, whatever else. And over time, your investment, your $35 investment in a Chromecast, or your $200 investment in an Echo, that's getting better, right? The value of this thing in your home, in your life, is only going up, and you paid so little for it to begin with that it's not, there's no value to lose on the hardware investment.
That is so true. And Matt, when we look at maybe 20 years ago, there was maybe one computer in the house. Now we see where we're at now. Now you have multiple devices, multiple cell phones, multiple smartphones, multiple Chromecasts. And was the price point the reason why we're seeing this influx in this tech?
Yeah, totally. Because, Moore's law says, right, that computing power is going to roughly double every 10 years, right? More or less. And so far it's been right. And then the really nice side effect of that is that processors are getting smaller and they're getting cheaper, so you can do a lot more with a lot less. Now that processors are so cheap and so relatively powerful, like your iPhone, or even an iPhone from 5 years ago, is more powerful than like your entire than a schoolroom full of IBM PS2 PCs, And like as time goes on, those processors are getting smaller, they're getting cheaper, and now it's like there's no financial reason not to put processors in Legos and action figures and you know what I mean? And like kids toys now are like they're more complicated and more powerful than my first computer growing up, and it's just incredible to see. And then, like you say, the fact that they're so cheap and so small and so readily available, it's more stuff, just full stop stuff. Like we're starting with thermostats, we're getting into fridges, we're getting into pots and pans and ovens and oven mitts and all that stuff because the processors themselves have gotten so cheap.
You bring up a very good point, especially when it comes to appliances now. And I've
Mm-hmm.
heard from ones who work in the appliance field saying that when you look at like Samsung, LG getting into the appliance business with the connected smart ranges and everything, that they're not really putting too much emphasis on the technology, not technology, but the engineering of the actual stove and what it's intended to do, but more when it comes to the connected part of it, to make sure you can have a calendar on there, but they don't make sure that my chilled wine won't stay cold. So are you starting to see that when it comes
That's right.
to some of these places who are these manufacturers
Well,
who are going into this?
I think so. I don't know that much about appliances directly, but I will say that this is still super, super early times for all of this, right? And it's like just like any fad, there's going to be this huge boom in stuff that should not be connected, but it will be. What I mean? Like the world doesn't really need an interconnected egg timer, at least not yet. The world doesn't really need a world where I can have my coffee maker start my coffee while I'm still lying in bed. You know what I mean? That's like it's not the best idea in the world. And I just think that as time goes on, as the technology matures, and as people start to figure out how this stuff can actually be useful and not just like, cool, hey, look what we can do, I think you're going to start seeing kind of a settling out. So basically, around the same time that you stop hearing all the hype, you'll start to see fridges that are better at being fridges than they are at showing your calendar.
Absolutely. It kind of reminds me of a few years back. I was at the Consumer Electronics Show, now CTA, Consumer Technology Association. And the funny thing about it was Sean Dubervac, he was giving his keynote, and he said, we started in the age of digitizing, but now we're like, should we digitize that? And you made up a very good
That's
point.
right.
It's just like, hey, yep, absolutely right.
Well, it's also like think back to like the dot-com boom, right? And it's like everyone was getting a website and everyone thought you had to sell your stuff online and you had to have a message board and a forum and you had to have it free overnight shipping. Do you remember outpost.com, which had free overnight shipping
Yes.
no matter what you ordered?
I guess.
Yeah, that was awesome. But it turned out it was a really lousy business, right?
Yeah.
And then, like 10 years later, Amazon introduces Amazon Prime, which is almost the same thing, but now it's suddenly this amazing business, right?
Yeah.
So, like, we need to have real conversations. Unfortunately, there's going to be companies that don't figure this out. But, over time, over 5, 10, 15 years, companies are going to figure out where it actually makes sense and figure out where it doesn't. And I kind of get the sense that, like, smart toasters are not the future.
So are you saying that my Pop-Tart, I can go ahead and continue to make it the old-fashioned way, right?
No, because pretty soon they're gonna have microchips in the Pop-Tart.
Oh.
The microchips getting so cheap. It'll ping your phone when it's ready.
That is so funny.
Good.
So Matt, where are we going when it comes to computers now? What are we going to start to see happen, especially when these devices and everything are kind of like making them obsolete? Where do we think we're headed?
So, like, I don't think that the PC, the tablet, the smartphone, even like they're not going to die. That millions and millions of people still use their computer every day. But I think that what's going to happen, and this is the part where Apple should start to get a little worried. It's like if I have $100 tablet and you have an $800 iPad, right? We're both accessing the same Facebook. We're both accessing the same Gmail, and like, no matter how expensive the gadget that I have is, you can't get on a better Facebook or a better Instagram or a better YouTube than I can from my cheap computer, right? So, and then as web services get better, as websites get better, as Gmail gets better and Facebook gets better and Microsoft Office 365 gets better, there's going to be less of a reason to own expensive gadgets in the first place. because the real action is happening on the web, and a cheap gadget can get onto the web just as well as an expensive gadget. And the Chromecast is kind of a Trojan horse for that idea, because my $35 Chromecast can get onto the same YouTube as your $200 Apple TV, right?
Wow.
And so you're gonna start to see the hardware you're on, the expensive hardware. I think the market for that is gonna go down a little bit, because people are starting to realize that a cheap laptop, a cheap tablet, a cheap phone is going to do them just as well as an expensive $1,000 whatever.
And it kind of reminds me of the car industry. Back, you had to have a Lexus, had to have a Mercedes-Benz, had to have BMW because it drives better. But you see some more economical cars out there that's, maybe 80% cheaper than those luxury cars that can get you to point A and point B. And it sounds like we're getting that way when it comes to tech too, because, Matt, and since you've been covering tech for a while, you know how it is. Like when the first iPhone came out, everybody was like, hey, I got to get an iPhone because it's an Apple product. And then when the Galaxy start jumping on the scene, I have to get the X7 Edge because the S4 just doesn't do it for me. So, we see that even when it comes to the tech field.
That's exactly right. Well, I mean, the car analogy is a really good one because, like, your Lexus and my Civic are driving on the same roads.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And it's Facebook's the road, and my $200 Android phone is riding the same information superhighway. I don't know if we still say that, but still riding the same information superhighway as your $700 Galaxy Edge.
Yes.
And it's going to push the pressure down. And then similarly, there's still going to be people who want to drive a Beamer, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to kill the market for iPhones or for high-end computers or for the iPad or, expensive stuff in general, because like they are better in some ways, but especially as the rest of the world starts really coming online in earnest. And, Facebook likes to talk about the next billion users in the developing world that are going to come online. And like the internet is going to be just as good to them on cheaper devices as it is for us. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes a whole lot of sense. And I like what you wrote in the article too. In this quote right here, Matt, you said, meanwhile, web-first companies like Amazon and Google are more than happy to exploit this, even as our notions. So this is cool.
Yeah, well, because it's like Facebook, like Amazon and Google, the thing that sets them apart from the Apples of the world and even the Microsofts of the world is that if there were no internet, Amazon and Google wouldn't exist. Mm-hmm. So they make hardware with stuff like the Echo and the Chromecast, and Google makes some Android phones and all that stuff, but that's not their business, Like they won't vanish overnight if people stop buying smartphones. So it's in their best interest to keep making their web services better, because that works on every device everywhere, right? You get online and you're using Google. You get online and you're using Facebook. You get online and you're using Amazon. That's not necessarily true for Apple or Microsoft or Samsung or anyone who specializes in kind of the higher end stuff.
That's true. And in your article, it wasn't touched on, but I'm pretty sure you probably feel this way too about the TV providers too, like the Direct TVs and the Dish Network and the Time Warner and all these different cable companies. Chromecast is really going to put a dent in their bottom line too.
Well, I mean, it's still the Chromecast. Look at it this way: they've sold 25 million Chromecasts. There's still a lot more people subscribed to cable, but it offers a way out, And it's like it's something that, like, as Hulu gets better, as Netflix gets better, as YouTube gets better, it's going to keep putting a dent, because devices like the Chromecast, you spend your $35 once and you access all of these services that you already have subscriptions to, and it gives you more flexibility in how you watch it. That's a big threat to the cable companies.
And you know what, Matt, I remember, the one thing the cable companies would do to scare you, it'd be like, well, you have this early termination fee. Now people are like, I paid $35. I'm actually making money when I pay the termination fee, because I don't have that $150, $200 bill every month.
That's right. And you do that. You pay your $10 or whatever for Netflix a month. You pay your $10 for Hulu, and you're still, a month, and you're still coming out ahead. And then plus, you can then watch it anywhere, anyway. I visit my parents and I catch up on Netflix using their tablet when I'm visiting them, Like it's all online anyway, so I don't really need to log into special accounts or make sure I'm connected to my cable box, and I have way more flexibility. And then furthermore, if I decide I don't like Netflix anymore, I just cancel it.
Yeah. You don't have to be threatened like $355 million, Matt, you owe me because you got rid of DirecTV.
That's right. And I think that, it's still, TV is big and powerful, and it's going to be around for a while. But this is just a really big existential threat that's going to play out over the next few years.
Awesome. And Matt, I really enjoyed that article, and, great insight when it comes to tech. So our listeners and viewers out there, how can they follow you and make sure they keep up to date on some of the tech news that's happening?
Cool. So I'm on Business Insider every day, and you can follow my Twitter at @Gamoid, GAMOID.
Awesome. And you can see it right there on the screen. Those of you who are watching on YouTube and live stream, and those of you listen on radio, you just have to check out the video podcast, as Matt and I had a great discussion. And Matt, before we let you go, my friend, anything else you'd like to let everyone know aware of this subject and just why it was so important to definitely let the masses know about this?
All I'll say is it's getting to the point where you should think twice before you spend $700 on a smartphone. Because think about how you actually use your phone, think about which apps you use, and think about what you're getting for your money.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm sure a lot of parents are like, thank you, Matt, because my daughter wants to come in. Not my daughter, I don't have the kids, but hypothetically speaking, some parents out there, they're like, hey, I want to get, my child wants this, they want that. Now you can say, hey, we can get this little economical thing right here, and you can watch the same thing. So, Matt, thank you so much for the insight. Hey, we'll have you back on as we talk more of tech going on. I know that was the great Matt Berger joining me. And it's a great insight. I tell you, we're going to start to see a shift here in the tech field when it comes to all the devices we used to all grow in love, and all this money we spending on these brand names. Yeah, I'm one of them too, I know. But Matt brings up a great point and some great insight when it comes to that. I want to hear from you, Chromecast users out there. Let me know how you like it. May have you on the show, and you let us know pros and cons. Or let me know your comments. We'll talk about it. Tweet me. Go to paulonwheels.com and check me out. And thank you so much. Coming up after the break, Steve Koenig joins me from the Consumer Technology Association. What's going on? What happened at CES Asia? And what's going on in the world when it comes to electronics? And here in the United States, to 4K, not to 4K? That is the question. Coming up next on the Tech Zone, I am Paul Amadeus Lane. Be back after these messages.